Welcome back to Your Anxious Child, 5 minute solutions and interviews with experts. Today, we are talking with Tamar Chansky, who is the founder of the Child and Adult Center for OCD and Anxiety in Philadelphia. And she is the author of several books, Freeing Your Child from Negative Thinking, Freeing Yourself from Anxiety, Freeing Your Child from Anxiety, and the one we're going to focus on today, which is newly revised, Freeing Your Child from Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. So, Tamara, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about your 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 book, which has really gone the distance. It's 25 years old.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
So there a couple of reasons why I was very kind of eager to kind of have Tamar Chansky on this podcast. For one, I have relentlessly borrowed so much from her book that sometimes I get confused about whether I'm talking or whether she's talking. And I have borrowed so many of her phrases and like in my own work with children with OCD. Um, and her book has really kind of stood the test of time over the past 25 years. I think one of the reasons it has, and one reason, again, I'm kind of eager to kind of have her on the show, is she is somebody who recognizes and has a capacity to deal with language and the transformational kind of qualities that language can have. And in a couple of senses. One, when we're dealing with children, perhaps what's more important than kind of theory is the capacity to translate concepts into user friendly words for our young little charges. They are, as one person once said, kind of cognitive aliens. They experience the world kind of differently. And there are very few people that really kind of get the idea about how to translate things into child friendly language. And when you find a person like that, it's really kind of a gift and kind of precious. And Tamara Chansky is one of those people. And I'll probably sprinkle in a number of her kind of phrases, as we kind of talk. But then there's another reason why language is so important in that it reframes the experience for all of us and makes what may seem like an onerous and impossible task into something that is difficult. Now, her language isn't always like fancy dancy and, going to, but it's just small efforts with language. So, she will say to a child, it's just an unfinished feeling, walk away. And then the all done signal will catch up with you later. And of course, there's her phrase junk mail, which has been used kind of repeatedly over and over again. And talking about kind of children who are susceptible, kind of OCD, she would say, well, your child has good crayons. Um,
Ted, I have to say, I don't know, this is a podcast. I don't know if people will see the video, but I'm sitting here tearing up at your words. That is just really moving me because I appreciate so much meeting with you in this place of understanding what the task really is making what can't be. It goes back to Mr. Rogers, frankly,
mhm,
right? He said something like, if something is mentionable, it's manageable.
mhm,
So being able to put into words what is going on for parents, for kids, when they just land in this place that makes no sense and is really scary. Um, that's, that is so much of it. And really it is so, I hadn't heard that idea of kids being cognitive aliens, but in some ways, I think they're so on the mark though. Like we're kind of the we're kind of the aliens. They really can describe. I'll never forget, a young, I don't know, maybe like 6-year-old or something who came in who had OCD, and he was saying something like, my stomach makes my heart hurt. And I think if you talk to an adult with OCD, they might say like, yeah, exactly. That feeling of dread it hurts. It hurts, it hurts my feelings. It hurts how I feel. It makes it difficult to function. So I think it's a great collaboration to work with kids. They bring so much to the table as well.
So one kind of question, as a general overview question, what's hap your book was published 25 years ago, and um I can remember, I remember looking the other day in my computer and seeing notes on your book from 2005. What's um what's happened in the past 25 years with regard to the treatment of OCD with children? What things have kind of remained the same and what things have changed, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, fortunately, I think one huge thing that happened is that treatment centers kind of popped up, all over the world, I would say, certainly all over the country. And so while it is still certainly the case that there are places where it's hard for parents to find someone who specializes in childhood OCD. It's just much more likely now. Like it really just kind of took off, if you will, in these last decades, which is wonderful. And I think, also the cultural conversation, if you will, just around mental health and maybe OCD, specifically or certainly right up there with other disorders. There's just more of a kind of an understanding of what it is. And so I think that has made like, more and more, and the internet happened and all of that. So, teenagers will go to their parents. Oh, that wasn't happening 25 years ago. Teenagers will go to their parents and say, I was Googling, I think this is what I have. Like, I really want to talk to somebody about this. That's awesome, that they're, because I always, when parents would come in with a teenager, you're always looking for that. What's the prognosis going to be, and it's really that if the teenager wants to do this, like wants to be on the other side of what's going on, that is going to drive them to do the, difficult, unpleasant, whatever. We can talk about what exposures are like, the work to get on the other side of it. So I think that kind of, especially for teens, there's much more, agency around getting help. Yeah, so those
Yeah.
are those are some
Well,
developments. What do you think, Ted?
I think I think what you're referring to is, the plus side of the internet, the plus side of, well, actually social media,
Yeah,
that, it's not all bad. Um, um, but it's a fine line in
yes,
terms of, um, kids coming in, with self-diagnosis in a way that is not necessarily very helpful.
right. Yeah.
Um,
I think too, if I could just, I'll put in a plug for what I think in general can happen in the next, maybe not generation, but this next wave with social media. I would say that so much has been done around kind of normalizing and making space for people to be open with what's going on with them. And I think the part that I think we're really ready for and kids are really ready for is not having that be kind of the destination, that that is their identity somehow, whatever it is. I'm anxious, I'm OCD, but really that the next wave would be about how to just make treatment, like how you get better, how you work with this to not have it control you, to have that be kind of the headlines on social media.
One of the things that comes across in your books is, inviting parents to think about when you have a child with OCD, you're entering like a different land. It's a different parenting landscape that requires some kind of adaptation to to this new situation that your child is finds themselves ill. And I wonder if you could talk about, in kind of general terms, what is this new landscape that parents and children find themselves in, and how do they begin to kind of orient themselves to it?
Yeah, I think, really, I want to credit John March with, and I want to credit Michael White before, the late Michael White, that the the idea that the narrative, it's what the narrative is that kind of explains what's going on, because, often kids with OCD are really well behaved, really rule following, really responsible, conscientious, all these things. And suddenly those kids are doing things that's making them upset, making their parents late for things, kind of disrupting the whole family. And so where families find themselves is in this place of, do I, this would normally be like a discipline kind of situation. They're breaking the rules or da 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 da. And so having kind of that overview framing to say that it's not your child that's the problem, it's not your parenting that's the problem, it's what OCD is telling your child. And that's why, the idea of turning it into kind of a third party, whether for teens, that might just be calling it OCD, for little kids, calling it brain bug or Mr. Perfect or something like that. So that then everyone can coordinate around making sure that, Mr. Perfect has as little say and control in what happens in the child's life and in the family's life. And so it's really kind of flipping that narrative to, you know, my child is the problem, to my child has this problem that really can be solved.
I
So
think what
important because it doesn't feel good when you're already not feeling good about what's going on, to also then be in trouble, and have people mad at you, all those things that are just really stressful.
and your phrase for that is, it's desperation, not manipulation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
which
That's really, thank you for bringing that up, because I think, I try to make sure in whatever I'm writing about or talking, to parents, that I get why that whatever name for that pattern might come up for them because it's their desperation too, their helplessness. But, kids are not trying, you might manipulate your parents to get to stay up later for something fun, not for doing rituals. No, you don't know how else to get out of that situation.
right.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful for parents to kind of just hear what are the kind of components of kind of the treatment of kind of OCD. And it's one of those things that I think we all benefit from, frankly, repetition.
Mhm.
And I think it would really be kind of helpful to hear how you break down the kind of the treatment of kind of OCD, and for then parents to potentially have something in mind when they kind of read your book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were talking earlier about just the power of psychoeducation and what we were just talking about, what's the narrative. So the first part of treatment really, and sometimes this is almost enough in a way, often not, but it does so much to have a workable framing of what's going on. This is a no fault disorder. It's treatable. um, Cognitive behavior therapy is the treatment of choice. And that involves, we'll get into more detail, but basically making why by thinking differently about what's happening, it's not, that I am gonna have bad luck if I don't tap, you know, on the right side and the left side evenly, 3 times. But it is that my brain is telling me that. My brain is making a mistake, and I'm the boss, and I'm going to correct that mistake and do the brave thing of breaking the rules so that I can see that that message, it's like getting in a swimming pool. It's going to feel bad at first, and you do it, and then you see that those messages and that feeling goes away, because we adjust to that because there was never kind of like it was a false alarm. So, sometimes so what therapy is being very methodical. Often families are like, well, okay, great, we understand. Like, let's take care of it this week. And it's really important to be very methodical about what is kind of the giant swimming pool and what's, a smaller one and what's a medium one. And so we have kids make a hierarchy from whatever, 1 to 10, of ranking how stressful different situations are for them so that they could then choose something that's in the middle and start there. And a lot of therapy is finding creative ways to meet in that place where you can make the situation approachable enough that the child is willing to do it, to challenge those patterns and be successful. And do that in the session, and then coach the parents if it's a young child, about how to practice that at home because repetition is really important. And so, as you continue to practice those new ways of, you know, taking silverware out or, tying your shoes or whatever it might be, that becomes then with practice kind of the new normal is kind of the old way. What I like to say to kids is if you last year it, how did you do that thing when OCD wasn't talking to you about it? Okay, what would be some steps to get to that place where you can last year it? What would it look like? So I think I'm working all virtually now, actually, but and I still do this to the computer, but I'm looking at my door here, and whenever folks would leave, I would always say, 2 words, patience and persistence, because it's hard to be patient, but it really pays off to do that.
Well, one of your phrases for parents with regard to this is that the child should be kind of leading this, and we're going to do it one fear at a time,
Yeah.
um, which I think, is so important for us parents to kind of remember because, in our impatience with this, in our desperation, we want to fix the problem. And jumping in and problem solving in a certain way can absolutely backfire.
Yes. In so many ways. So, we want to honor the fact that parents would very much feel that way, right? That their feeling of impatience or just desire to kind of whisk their child out of this or, make life simpler again or livable, they may even feel totally understandable. That's why the patience and persistence, because it's going to it's going to work when you can really let your child lead the way of what they are ready to tackle. That said, if there are things that your child is not ready to tackle, but they are really kind of, you know, making obstacles in your day-to-day life, let's talk about what those are to, okay, your child can't do something at home. Can they do more in the car on the way to school, which you wouldn't want to have as your kind of ultimate goal of your child putting on shoes and socks in the car. You want that to happen at home. Everybody does. But flexibility, it may be that in order to, you know, get to school somewhat on time, it's going to be helpful to have that give, make it, uh, kind of a strange order, if you will, for a bit, so that people keep moving and feeling more successful, and eventually you do get to that. And that, it's hard. That kind of thing, uh, is can be hard as a parent to, again, to think like, okay, wait, is this giving in? Is this enabling? And the idea is that you're enabling your child to do their life. You don't want to enable the OCD. There's a difference there. You're doing something that will help your child keep moving. That makes sense to do.
You bring up a point in your book that I'm not sure I've seen described so clearly elsewhere, which is the issue of how do you create a sense of psychological safety when you're in the land of OCD? Because as say several times, providing reassurance, is not going to work. And your I think your phrase goes along something like, the problem with reassurance is that it doesn't stick and you have to keep on reapplying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so we're not the goal is not to provide a sense of safety through reassurance. Then, I mean, seriously, how do you propose we do it?
Yes. Really good question. And I'm
Uh,
sure parents listening are like, "Oh," when they've asked me for the 10th time, well, yeah, I mean, part of me wants to just give the answer, and part of me wants to just like explode. It's like, I've said this 10, again, to be understandable, we want to have a different way. So, yeah, it just, if that worked, and I think I say this, if reassurance worked the way it does not in the land of OCD, there would be no land of OCD. That's really the thing, is that it's still 2 seconds later, or even in that moment, you say, good night. Can you say it again? I wasn't paying attention. I had another bad thought come in. Could you just say it one more time? Or the dog walked by with just the OCD, the way that it the way that it works is that it really interferes with that sense of closure or satisfaction, or safety, if you will. It keeps, the Groundhog Day kind of phenomenon, it keeps coming up, like you've never heard this before or something like that. So that's just the nature of what it is. So your presence, though, in understanding that, is going to be reassuring to your child much more than your just kind of ask and answer, which doesn't go anywhere.
yeah, I have been so impressed with how persistent that reassurance seeking can be. Because with my own son, and he's given me permission to kind of talk about this, we were pretty much, on point, on guard, from very early on, doing that sounds like a brain bug talking. Let's make it wait 10 minutes
Yeah.
or, and then see, or variations like that. And, still, 20 years later, it still comes up and we're still, it's it's really challenging.
Yeah. I think if you absolutely really challenging, but I think if you can explain why that's happening and that it's not wrong,
Mhm.
that that again is can be reassuring as well if you said whatever that brain bug is really persistent or nothing, nothing is good enough. I like to go in the direction of levity and sarcasm because that changes the emotional tone. When you are scared, that is very, we are wired to pay all attention to that. When you can, outside the moment, talk about kind of poking fun at the brain bug to say, brain bug's not listening. It's not your child. It's like brain bug is it, clean your ears, brain bug. I don't think you heard it. Do you want to
Mhm.
say it again or should I? You just change that whole dynamic of what's happening that your child is kind of, it's reassuring to see that you would be playful with them around this. They're kind of the good guy and the smart one too, because they're in on the joke too. Brain bug is the one that is not, understanding. And with teenagers, they have their own version of that. It's like, yeah, that, thank you. That question, the 10th time was the charm. You're absolutely right that, we just really don't know if the door's shut, something like that. So again, they're having a sense of agency that they know what's going on, even if it's difficult. They're not kind of at the mercy of OCD's version of what is happening.
You're, Michael White, who you referred to earlier, famously said, anxiety is allergic to humor.
Oh, wow, I never heard that. That's
Yeah, it's
wonderful.
it's
That
got it,
explains everything.
it's got its allergies too, and it's allergic to
Yes.
humor.
Oh, that is a gem.
Um,
Yes, right, because you cannot be two places at once. Reciprocal inhibition is the fancy word for this. If you're in a fear mode and then you're, like you could be having a tense conversation with your spouse or whatever, whatever, and somebody sneezes or, drops something and it just like breaks, it's sort of that comic relief. And suddenly you're not in the place that you were before.
um, so we're trying to, if I'm understanding your perspective correctly, we're trying to kind of empathize with the feeling, but at the same, that it's a scary thought, but not provide kind of reassurance.
Yes.
Yeah, that which boy, that's a sneaky one because even the absence of response can be interpreted as reassurance. Well, they
Mhm.
didn't say anything bad was going to happen, so I guess it's okay. They can be awfully sneaky.
Right. And look, we have to practice what we preach that there's no such thing as perfect.
Hmm.
So even if sometimes it is like that, the kids are sort of reading between the lines and, analyzing your behavior to see what's what, that it's very, look, when something is serious, parents are serious about it.
Hmm.
That's just what we do. It's like, you did not. I heard a parent the other day, their child was crossing the street and they were like, it would have been better if you'd done it before you stepped out, but good that you did it. It's just there's a certain tone. We have to help our kids stay safe, for a long time, right? So when parents are not meeting that same seriousness. And again, you never are joking at your child's expense or, a mismatch that way, but we convey so much of what is important or not by how we respond. And if we're seeing this as a time when we can play some, or suggesting that our kids do that. We would never do that with something serious. That even even if it's, 82% of the time that, that's enough and our kids sort of get it and they don't ask again, like that, you're really shifting what this interaction is about. That's really powerful. So parents, and pass the microphone. It is a shared job because everything that you do, just like everything we do as parents, why do we tell our kids to brush their teeth? Eventually, we want them to know how to, it's all about their internalizing the things that matter. So eventually, kids are going to internalize that sense that because you handed them the microphone sometimes, that they can boss back or they can downgrade the authority. They can say this is junk mail, even though it sounds like real mail. That's what they're going to take with them because you want them to be independent with this. And so, yeah.
So, in simple kind of, words, the treatment involves kind of doing the opposite.
Mhm.
I wonder if you
Exactly.
could kind of just give some examples of that. Um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
just
any kind of opposite. So if a simple example would be, if you feel like you need to, and this is one, talk about language. I am a stickler about this. Kids will say, and when I touch my right shoulder, I have to touch my left one. I'm like, hello, can I be your editor? Can you do it? And they're like, I feel like I have to. And I'm like, exactly. This is so important. If you have to do something, your brain is going to stay on you until you do it. If you say what it actually is, that I feel like I have to, or my brain is sending me those signals that I have to, that makes that room for you to do the opposite, to do something different. So, yeah, when I'm demonstrating, let's say with symmetry, evening things out. I'll say, let's, look, I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt. How about we have one arm down, one arm up, same with your socks, something like that, so that doing those practices where OCD is saying everything has to be exactly even, we're breaking the rules, we're doing the opposite to break that up, or we're doing something unevenly, or washing your hands, you have to. Now, I feel like I have to go up to my wrists washing my hands. Okay, that's a feeling. If we last year it before OCD was bothering you, what would you have done? I didn't want to wash my hands. It was boring. Great. What could that look like here? So the opposite is breaking the rules of what, the pattern is.
and I
Starting with
can
the left instead of the right, any which way.
well any way that I think you point any way that introduces a slightly different note can be kind of breaking the rules. That kind of any slight deviation. I
Yes.
think at one point at the conference you were giving an example of saying the kind of forbidden words or thoughts to the tune of Elvis Presley's "I Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog."
Oh, that was a real moment. And we do that.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, again, it's the levity there that
yeah.
Um, whether it's, yeah, kids, I mean, this is the thing. You work, why are we here? You start working with these kids and you're just completely drawn in. You want to help them free themselves because it's just horrible for, a little kid to think that they are bad, that they stole an eraser because when they walked by an eraser that maybe was pretty, but they didn't take it. That brain bug saying, like, you stole that, or you took that eraser. How do you know? You better ask your mom. Check my bag because I think I did. Well, I might have, just you. your heart just completely goes to these kids. But then, yes, you might do a song to play, turn it around on OCD to, make a song about to row, row, row your boat about how bad you are. It just, you're taking the words but turning it into something else. Um, that is, that's funny to the child. I just want to say, so a lot of things that I'm talking about, we wouldn't expect parents like, oh, I heard this idea, to make fun of your habits or something like that. We have to layer in a sense of trust and understanding that we know that this isn't something you want to be doing, even though it feels really, really strong. And now we're going to figure out some ways step by step of seeing that when you break those rules, that signal gets weaker and you get stronger. The levity, you might, uh, put in a little here and there until your child's really ready, sort of feeling more confident about what's going on to be able to do that. That's the art of it. That's why, the science in some ways, when you were saying what's changed, and I said so many treatment centers have popped up and everything, I think, before people were kind of afraid of treating OCD, even to therapists, it seemed like, how do you get in there? Like, I don't understand. And then when, we had these great treatment protocols, John March, it so simplified in a way what the goal was. And then I think people's creativity started to be able to kind of, enliven that. And then kids have so much of it too, that has been just such a game changer.
There's kind of two technical points that I'd like you to kind of help kind of clarify. The first is we're personifying kind of anxiety, which is really a powerhouse of an idea and so kind of, a real workhorse in terms of the treatment of OCD. How do we engage in this? How do we boss it back, shall we say, but not engage in an argument with it? Because I think, as you've kind of pointed out in some of your writings, OCD is really good at arguing.
Yeah.
And we don't want to engage in that, but we want to boss it back. And how can we make sure that we're um, doing one and not the other, or just some thoughts?
Yeah, it's great, great question. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to, maybe you can find my answer in my answer. I'll do my best.
Okay.
Because it really is the same kind of, once and done kind of rule in a sense with, checking something or washing or something like that. It's sort of that with relabeling what's happening too, that if you are going back and forth in an argument, you're in the loop still. So, with little kids, I'll say, can you just shake your bossy finger at OCD? Little kids love to do that. And say, you're not, I'm not listening to you, you're wrong. And I say, like, oh, tell it, how is it wrong? And then it's sort of like, if it comes back and it's saying, like, well, da 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 da, and we'll do those role plays that we want kids to kind of be the broken record of, like, I explained it, I'm done, or like, no, or like, oh yeah, you're right, but can't talk, I think your mom's calling OCD or something like that, so that we're showing them how to not get pulled in. It's like, is it doing it again?
Mhm.
You let it somewhere else and now it's doing, isn't it the same kind of thing? Yeah. So what are you going to say? So you're sort of helping kids to see that process that OCD can take them through, and resisting that.
Yeah.
Because I think the whole point of, like, why do we relabel? Why do we say junk mail, things like that? It's really about downgrading the authority of this. When I use the junk mail idea, or, telemarketer or something, I say, do you read with a highlighter pen your, junk mail or your spam messages now? No, you recognize like that. So the arguing wouldn't make sense because what is before that is you're recognizing that that is not a worthy foe. Like it does not make sense to engage. You wouldn't do that about your spam, You know what it is. You know that and you put it in the trash.
We need a sort of fluid balance between, you know, pushing back, bossing back, and ignoring, just like with a telemarketer. We need to be able to hang up the phone, but we
Yeah.
also need to not take what they're saying seriously. And we need kind of both.
Yes.
Kind of
Yeah,
it's
exactly. But who would, this is the thing though. I think I say this, in my book that if you don't tell kids that it's okay to do that and that there's a good reason, it just seems not even strange, like just an impossibility.
right.
Kids will say like, well, you're calling, you're calling me, to say this, but you're telling me that it's such and such, but it is really just a thought. That's all that it is.
The other kind of thing I'd like your kind of help in clarifying, because OCD is a tricky little customer.
Mhm.
Um, the difference between um, refocusing your attention versus trying to kind of distract yourself.
Yes.
Yes, because while you're waiting for the anxiety or the thought to kind of go away, I mean, sometimes you need to kind of just sit and let it kind of dissipate. But it can be also helpful to refocus onto something kind of as value, which you'd rather be doing. But it's sneaky because it can also be a form of distraction, and I'd love to know how you kind of muscle through those problems.
Yeah. And Ted, I just want to go back. Sorry, someone texted me and I,
Yeah.
I lost. I don't even know if I answered your question on the last one, but I just want to make one, kind of close the loop on this, that what is hard for kids is the idea that you can have thoughts that are not personal. And
Mhm.
that's why I will quote that study from the, I don't know, 1980s or something, where they had OCD, they had people just write down their thoughts, people with OCD, people without, and OCD experts tried to determine whose thoughts, were the ones of the folks who had OCD. And, often kids are like with it and they'll say, like, they couldn't tell the difference. And I say, exactly, because everybody has just, you know, random thoughts, inappropriate thoughts. They don't define us. They just like you can just let them go by. So, yes, did that thought happen in your brain? Absolutely. Is it personal? Like that's part of you? No. And that's just even for adults, that's a really important part of the psychoeducation is to know that you can have a thought go through. I say like intrusive thoughts just barge in. They're not like knocking on the door and say, do you want to think about this? It's more just like there they are. So just to have that be clear that just because there is a thought there, you don't have to claim it. It can be in your stream of consciousness. That, yeah, I have some great, my husband does all the artwork, and there's just some great, great pictures in there, like the boot in the fridge. If you see a boot in your refrigerator, you don't think like, okay, fried boot for dinner. You think like, what's that doing there? And that's what you want to do with your thoughts. But so I wanted to close the loop on that one. When you were talking about the like distracting, can that be good? Can that be problematic? I say that if you think that there's a fire next to you, if you just try to distract yourself and say like it's not, I'm just going to do something else, it's not there. If there's really a fire, that's a problem. But if it's a picture of a fire, you can go do whatever you want. So, helping kids to on purpose decide to pivot rather than distracting themselves from something that they think is still legitimate and still there, that they're just sort of delaying,
Mhm.
right? So I always say, distraction or intentional engagement is a good step two. Step one is to label what it is. It's like, this is not, that's OCD. This is not an emergency, but it's really going to keep talking to me. So, yeah, I'm going to decide to pivot and do something that's better with my time.
So the labeling is the kind of the critical element there.
Yeah,
And then go on to do something more important, something valuable, something like, right?
yeah,
So,
exactly.
so tomorrow we are about out of time, and I would like to kind of thank you for giving us, well, I think it's more a sampling of kind of some of your thinking, and kind of I'm hoping it kind of gives our listeners kind of an entree point to looking at all of your books actually. And where can they access some of your other material?
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to say, Ted, it's just such a pleasure to talk with you.
Well,
You're a word person too.
it's
So that's always fun.
right.
That is always great. Yeah. So I just want to say, yeah, the 25th anniversary edition of Freeing Your Child from OCD, I changed just about every page of this book. I I showed this as my visual aid. This was the original,
Uh,
and these
wow.
are post-it notes and they don't even begin to reflect how I went through it. I had an incredible editor who let me do what I felt needed to be done. I'm very grateful to her. So please look for the updated and revised edition of Freeing Your Child from OCD. And on my website, I have blog posts about so many different kinds of anxiety and anxiety situations. And that's just my name, tamarchansky.com. And there's a good search feature. You can just, put in vomit phobia or negative thinking or OCD, tics. I have blog posts about a lot of topics, and feel free to let me know if there's something, that you'd like to see that's not there.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's really been a pleasure.